Welcome back. It's Miss Leslie with part 2 of our sculptured painting called Tree Swing. First time we did the sculpture, and now we're going to do the painting part. Here's what you'll need. Sculpture that we did during the first part of this video, your paint colors, a palette, small brush, and then we have a cup of water for rinsing your paintbrushes. Don't drink it once you rinse your brush in there. And you'll need a paper towel or some sort of cloth to dry your brushes off in between rinsing them. So the first color we're going to use is brown. You can really use any of the colors that you want on your tree. Everyone has about 7 or 8 colors plus a metallic. So we want to save the metallic one for last. But you can use any of your other colors, and if you want to make this a pink tree with a red swing, you can do that. I'm going to start with traditional colors just because that's what my sample was. So before you open any of your paints, you want to make sure that they're shaken up really well. So I'm going to shake this guy up, and I'm going to take a little bit and put it in my palette. This brown is a little chunky. It's kind of gross, but what are you going to do? And I'm just going to put my paint colors in my palette one at a time. So I'm using brown first. That's all I need to put in there. I'm going to take my paintbrush. It does not need to be wet first. If it's wet, that can disturb the Mod Podge. So just get a bunch of paint on that brush, and we're going to start on the tree. And you want to make sure that you're getting the paint into all of those little crevices, all of the texture we created with the tape. We want to make sure that it's all filled up. So we're just going to paint sort of the top layer of the tree first, and then we'll do the sides. But we want to get all those little nooks and crannies filled up as much as possible. And don't worry if you get some of this brown paint on an area that's not your tree. So like if you get some in what will eventually be the sky or the ground, that's okay, because the next color will just cover it up. Paint my branch here. So now that I have most of the tree front painted, I'm going to pick up my canvas now so that I can get along the sides of the tree. So we don't want anything where there's tape on this tree. We want that covered with brown. I don't want to see any of that yellowish tape poking through. And I want to make this nice and solid. The goal at the end of painting is that none of the canvas and none of the tape shows through. We don't want to see anything but paint and the beautiful texture that you created with your sculpture. So I like to turn my painting in all different directions to make sure I am getting in all of those little cracks, because you can't really see it unless you switch your canvas around. So I want to get in all of those little spots. I want to follow off the edge of the painting. If my roots or branches, if they wrap around the edge, I want to make sure I paint those brown as well. Okay, so I've done this angle, and now I'm going to switch it around and do it this way. Now you can see I have my tree painted. It's kind of messy around the edges, and that's totally okay. I'm gonna rinse out my brush. I'm gonna keep using the same brush for all of my colors. So that's why I want to make sure it's rinsed and then dried off very well. Next, I'm going to do green for the grass. Again, take my green paint, shake it up really well. Squeeze some into my palette. Woo. Okay. All right, now we're going to paint the ground. I'm going to start by just making a green line across where I want the ground to be. It doesn't have to be even or straight. You can even make it a little curved if you want. But I just want to put it under the swing. Okay. And then now while we're painting this, everything from here down is going to be green. We're also going to paint the side edges of the canvas, but we can save those for last. For now, we're going to use our brush to get right up next to the edge of the tree. So I'm just going to sort of cut it in there. Make sure there's no white spot between the tree and the green grass. And then I'm going to go back in and just paint in that whole area. Now, I found that this type of paint, sometimes you need to do 2 coats to get a solid color. So if you're finding that after painting it on once, you can still see a lot of the canvas through it, that is okay. Just wait for it to dry a little bit, and then you can put on another layer and make it a nice solid color. So just going right up into the edges of these tree roots here. Also, I like to hold my paintings while I'm painting them for a couple of different reasons. I don't mind getting paint on my hands, for one thing. If you do mind that, don't hold your painting. But it also allows me to just get every angle I need to get. If I lay it flat like this and I just paint like this, I won't see all of the little cracks and crevices that I need to fill in. And then there might be some white spots, which, as you know, I'm not a big fan of. Now, I may have mentioned this before, or I should have mentioned this before. You want to make sure that your work surface is protected. So you don't want this paint to get on your kitchen table, I assume. So put down a little piece of newspaper or maybe a couple of paper towels under your painting so that you don't get smears like that right there, which I will clean up when I'm done here. But I'm sure your parents would not appreciate having paint all over the place where you eat. So once you do the edges here, before you set it down again, make sure that you've got something protecting your work surface. Okay. Okay, there's the green, mostly done there. You can see it's a little streaky, and there are some spots that look like you can see the canvas through them. So I'm going to let this dry and go on to my next color and do the sky. I'm rinsing out my brush, just wiggling it around in there, get all the green out. Now in the original example that I made, I used blue for the sky. And after seeing that done, it's a little dark for me. So to change things up, in my new painting, I'm going to do the sky in yellow. Okay, we'll see how that looks. Everybody should have some sort of yellow in their kit. Shake it, shake it, shake it. Squeeze it in the palette. Oops. Don't drip. Some of your paints may be a little clumpy, and that's okay. I'm going to turn it upside down so I can get a better angle here. I'm going to start right next to the tree. I'm going to go right up to the brown, right along the swing. Fill that in. I'm going to leave this area right here by the grass I'm gonna leave that alone since it's still wet. I don't really want it to smear with the yellow. So I'm gonna concentrate up here and then I'll go back in and fill in that. Just remember as you're going, go right up to the edge of your branch or of your swing. It's okay if you get some yellow on your swing ropes, and you want to paint the space in between your ropes as well. That's the sky showing through there. Don't worry about being messy with this part. So as I am painting next to my green grass, you can see it's smearing a little bit. That's no big deal. You know, I thought that was going to bother me if that happened, but it turns out I didn't rinse my brush very well, so there's green streaks kind of everywhere in my yellow. That is okay. Because sometimes you just got to go with the flow. And the flow of this painting includes green streaks in the sky, so what are you going to do? Okay, I'm going to go back in and paint all the edges now. Making sure there's no white visible anywhere on this canvas. Also, speaking of which, I would like to point out that there is no white paint in your paint kits. You have two little bottles that look like white paint, but this is Mod Podge. Both of these are Mod Podge. Neither one of them is white paint. I mean, you can try to use it as paint, but it's just going to dry clear, so I think that'll kind of defeat the purpose. But in any of our projects, we really don't have a need for white paint. So we're using the colors we have. Okay, just this one last side. And as I'm doing this, I'm kind of checking out my tree, making sure that I don't see any gaps in the brown paint from all these angles here. And I don't see any so far. All right. Now you can see around my branches here, I can see some brown through the yellow. I painted yellow on top of brown, and yellow is a lighter color, so it makes it more difficult to cover it up. But I'm going to do just that. I'm going to try to just put another layer of yellow on top of there. There we go. That looks a little better. Same with a couple of these other branches. So it's best to let the paint dry a little bit before you put on a second layer. But for the purposes of just being quick here in this class, I'm just going to show you how to do it. But if you find that if you're painting on top of wet paint, what happens sometimes is it pulls the paint off the canvas. So it happened when I was doing my original example with the green. I painted green on top of green when it wasn't dry yet, and it just came all the way off. So give it a couple minutes to dry before you do another layer. All right, that's pretty good. I like that sky better than the blue sky. That was a little dark for me. But if you wanted to, you could always paint a sunshine and do blue around that. It's up to you. And like I said, if you want to use any of the colors for any of these parts, you certainly can. Have an orange sky if you want. You know, it's none of my business what color your sky is. Okay, now we have to paint the swing. And this is one where you can really use any color you like. In the original, I did orange rope with kind of a yellow and blue mixed together. That happened when I painted the swing seat yellow and then it got mixed in with the blue underneath here. But for now, I think I'm going to make this swing have a red seat. And I think we'll do orange ropes in a red seat. So it's nice and colorful. As far as I'm concerned, you can never have too much color. The brighter, the better. Because I'm still using the same brush, I'm going to rinse it out really well. And then also make sure it's dry really well. Now, because you're painting a smaller area here, these ropes are kind of skinny, okay? You want to use a very small amount of paint on your brush. So I'm just going to dip just a little bit, okay? You can see it's not even on both sides so much. But I want to be able to control where the paint goes, and the easiest way to do that is to have less paint. And I did kind of slop yellow all over these ropes, so I don't have to try too hard to make sure all the gaps are filled in by the orange. I already did that pretty much with the yellow. So when you're doing this step, just go slow. Use a very small amount of paint. You can always add more paint to your brush, but once it's smeared on your canvas, it's pretty much there. You're kind of stuck with it. Little bits at a time. And you can see, even though I'm trying to be pretty careful, I got a little bit on the side there. If you want, you can just use the end of your brush to scrape that up, or even your finger would be fine. And if that little bit of smear bothers you there, later on you can go back in with some more yellow and touch it up. Okay, so these ropes, they thick. What you gonna do? And then remember, we wrapped some tape up here around the branch. I want to paint that also, so it looks like the rope is wrapping around the branch. Now, this looks a little messy for my taste, so I want you guys to take care to be more careful than I have been in doing this. Also, I'm standing up so that I can see what I'm doing through the iPad, and that's kind of throwing me off. So when you're doing these skinny parts, just be careful. Use small amounts of paint. Take your time and be patient, okay? I've been a little impatient while I'm doing this, and that's why I got a kind of a messy result. Just now I splashed some water on there. I didn't like that. Okay, we're gonna move on to the red swing seat. Again, small amount of paint, tiny little bit, just on the tip of the brush there. I'm gonna paint the top, the part that's facing me. Okay. And now I am going to try to sit down for this part and see if I can keep everything in frame. Moving on to doing the edges. I'm going to do the underneath edge and just try to fill in the bottom of that seat without having the paint go too far beyond into the yellow sky underneath it. Same thing on the side here. And on the top, because this swing is three-dimensional, we got to get all the way around all the sides. Keep turning it so I can get this edge as well. All right, there is that. Okay. Next, what I'm going to do, so it's really bothering me that those ropes on the swing are so uneven looking. So I'm going to rinse my brush out again, and I'm going to go back in with some yellow paint around it to kind of clean it up. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Yellow paint on my brush, and I'm just going to cover up the orange. That is where I don't want it to be. And that already looks much better just doing that one little spot. There we go. My need for order has been restored. Okay. So you can do this too. If you overlap If you get paint where you don't want it, just let it dry a little bit, and then you can go right back in and cover it up with the color that you do want to be there. Okay? Right. I'm gonna do a little bit more in this little corner right here. And right there. Oh, see, I went too far. Okay, good. All right, now there's one final official step, but before you do that, take a look at your painting and decide if you want to cover up some of these areas. Like here's where I was talking about where you can see the canvas through here. I am going to take some time to do a little bit more green paint there to make that nice and solid before we do our final step. Word to the wise, friends, do not set your paintbrushes in your paint cup and set it down because it'll tip right over. These cups are too small for the height of the brush. So use it to rinse your brush and then set your brush aside, okay? So moving on, we are now going to do the final step, which is to add some metallic paint to this tree. Now everybody has the same type of metallic antique silver. It's a little glittery, okay? You want to shake it up first. Put a tiny little bit of it in your palette because we're not going to use very much at all. Just like a little bit like that, like a little drop. And now we're going to go back to the brush we used to put on our Mod Podge and tissue paper. I'm going to use this little stiff bristled brush, okay? And what I'm going to do, make sure this is all the way dry, is I'm going to take it and I'm just going to dip the side of my brush in the paint just a little bit and sort of wipe it off. I don't want very much paint on there. I don't want a big glob, okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape it. I'm going to hold my brush not like this, not up and down. I'm going to hold it sideways so that it's parallel to the painting. And I'm going to very lightly scrape across the ridges in my tree. So I'm not painting so much as scraping the paint onto the canvas. Just a very small amount at a time. Now at this step, you do not want it to go into all the crevices. The point of this is for it to just sit on top and sort of highlight all of the texture that you made with the paint. That's going to really make the bark stand out and look like bark. And with the silver on the brown, it kind of looks like, you know, maybe the sun is setting and it's getting it a little bit of glow cast from the sun onto this, a little bit of highlight. And again, I'm just very lightly, like I'm barely touching the tree branches with the brush, okay? They're barely touching. And I'm going to avoid doing over the orange here, okay? I'm going to skip that and just go a little bit in the middle. And just sort of add a little bit more here and there until I get it all off my brush. Okay, a little bit more up here. And this is just defining that texture that you made. So there you have it. There is our completed tree swing. Now, if you wanted to take this an extra step and add some flowers in here, you could certainly do that. I'm going to do a little technique. It's probably the easiest way on earth you can do to add little flowers to things. I'm going to take what I call the butt end of the brush, as opposed to the bristles. This is the butt. And I'm going to dip it directly in the paint. Let's do some yellow ones. And I'm just going to add some dots. Just boop, boop, boop. Just stamp it right on there. Boop, boop. And you want to do it like randomly. You can do little clusters of dots. I want to do this with both yellow and red, so it looks like we have a field of flowers here. And all your dots are going to be different sizes, and that's cool because it makes it look like the flowers are not only different sizes, but are different distances away from your eyes. Further or closer. Put some on the side too. Okay, when I'm done with that, I'm going to just wipe that off on my towel. I'm going to do the same thing with red, just because I have a little extra red paint. And if you want to make your flowers a little bit bigger, you can stamp it on there and then just sort of wiggle it around in a little circle. Okay. Blue. Okay, I think that does it for me. I'm happy with this. Now the final step in any painting is always to sign your name. And you can either do that on the front or the back. Because this is wet, I'm not going to do it here to show you guys, but when it's done, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do my name on the back. Just so no one else can ever take credit for my artwork. And you should do the same thing. You all produce such beautiful pieces of art that we wouldn't want anyone else taking them and saying that they made it. So there you have it, my sculptured tree swing, complete with flowers in the grass. Looks like a fun day at the park. Thanks everybody. Have a great day.